afternoon, everybody. I'm Frank Dolan from Arsenal Advisors. I hope you're doing fantastic. Thanks for joining us today on LinkedIn Live to have a conversation about elevating the HCP experiences. This is a big conversation for our friends in the biopharma and medtech community. So we thought we'd just take a few minutes today to talk a little bit about some tips and tricks on handling this important topic. You know, if we've got a brand that's ultimately going to serve patients, it's going to go through the HCP. And we really need to think about how we're driving an experience that is not only effective for us, but really stands out in a sea of competition. Most physicians are dealing with hundreds of active brands. And with all of the campaigns and tactics that are going on there, you can think of thousands and thousands of touch points that they have with a given brand, whether it's disease state education or something that's purely promotional, or even something further like a patient engagement program or beyond. We are trying to communicate value in a way that creates action for our providers. So this topic today will be for a few minutes, but next week on September 9th and 10th, I hope you join us at the Medicine to Market Summit. We're talking about brand breakthroughs, and this topic will be explored very, very thoroughly. Okay, so let's have some fun and take it a little bit further, but I need to be joined by some company to talk about this a little bit more. I want to introduce to you Andrea Westmeyer. Andrea, welcome. I know you're running a company called Measurement Mojo. That sounds really interesting. Let's learn about you and your company.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being here today. And yes, the topic is probably quite near and dear to our hearts. Our company has been around for about 9 years. I founded that. And what we do is help organizations really maximize their commercial impact. And so we do that. What we think about is leveraging people and data so that you can unleash the marketing and sales potential of the organization. So a lot of conversation around performance insights and accountability metrics, and of course, ways to help align teams so that they can predict and improve their performance, and obviously ROI.
Very important stuff. That sounds really, really cool. We're going to learn more about that and your unique perspective on our topic today. That being said, we've got one more guest to bring in to talk a little bit further, and that is the CEO of Impiricus, the one and only Sandy Donaldson. Sandy, welcome.
Hey, Frank. It's great to be with you.
It's great to have you here. Sandy, you know what? A lot of us know you that are from the biopharma sector, but why don't you make sure all of us know a little bit about your background as well as the company that you started recently?
Sure. And first of all, thanks, Frank. It's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to joining the summit on the 9th and 10th of September. So my background is in pharma, and I was leading UCB's omni-channel digital marketing efforts. And then in 2020, I created Impiricus. I'm the co-founder and CEO. And what Impiricus does is it's a platform for physicians, and we create really elegant, impactful clinical tools for them. Our first tool is Concierge, and it acts as an interface and a way for them to access resources from industry, as well as utilizing our own medical assistants to be able to support getting their patients on therapy. And then with our pharma partners and clients, we help them to engage by sending occasional messages and helping them to interact with our network.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to have you here, and congratulations on the entrepreneurial journey. There's not a lot of us that necessarily leave the warm embrace of biopharma to go out and do our own thing. So when it comes to making impact and changing lives, Sandy, I know you're really committed to that. All right, so let's drop some statistics here. When we think about the uncertainty in the marketplace for the life sciences sector, we think about engagement, we think about metrics. There's so much that we've got to go ahead and think about, but let's talk about the uncertainty piece. I don't think anyone would argue that the marketplace that life science organizations are working in, and I mean biopharma and medtech specifically, that our brands are using strategies and tactics that were developed and honed many, many years ago, but the last 18 or so months have really flipped the script on what we're able to do and help to figure out what's working and what's effective. Now, if we go back in time, I think we all agree at the stats that we've seen many, many times over, which is only about 60% of brands, find themselves in a position where they're, even close to kind of the launch forecast. In fact, over half the brands actually don't even meet those expectations. So there's a challenge with meeting their expectations when it comes to launches. And I think launches are interesting because it's such a great kind of petri dish, if you will, to test the promotional environment that we're in. So let's build upon that. So one of the statistical websites that are out there that is global statistics, they're talking about the pharmaceutical industry in particular. Between now and 2025, $19 billion of revenue of launch brands is said to be negatively impacted by what's going on. So we've tried a lot of things. And that being said, as we do look at the last year or two, in response to the changing environment that has created this uncertainty, that has created this tumult, what have we seen? We've seen many organizations pilot lots of new initiatives. And while new initiatives are great, a new tool, tactic, strategy, you name it, awesome, that's fantastic, that's fun. But how do we know if it's working? So along with the uncertainty that's been created, along with all the new approaches that we've brought onto the brand, how do we make sense of what's working and what's not? Because it seems like all the calculus in what we do has changed. So Andrea, I'd love for you to help us out a little bit when it comes to this market of uncertainty that exists. Is how do you see the uncertainty in the market from your unique perspective? And what do you think are some of the stakes at hand for some of these life science organizations?
Well, it is most definitely, Frank. It is the new and still evolving. I think it's the new and evolving normal. Sales and marketing are being required to be more integrated than they've ever been in the past. We're going through this. Everyone keeps talking about the significant digital transformation, and that is undoubtedly occurring. Something that I think has been called for, but maybe largely ignored, and most companies don't necessarily have an existing blueprint for how they are going to look at overall commercial effectiveness. And so I would say, some of this is probably coming back a little bit to the basics in terms of how we think about the integration of the brand strategy. I think that brand teams do a really good job with that, but maybe the opportunity exists to more closely tie what they're measuring back to those key brand objectives so that they really get clear on what's impacting both the customer engagement and ultimately driving revenue. So I think, there's always going to be inefficiencies in the commercial ecosystem. However, I think there are ways for us to identify the inefficiencies and enhance what is working. Certainly analytics is an asset for doing that.
I appreciate that. And Sandy, from your perspective in industry, as well as having a unique perch and seeing what many, many brands are doing right now, what do you think is driving this uncertainty in the biopharma marketplace?
So I'm very lucky, Frank, in that I every day get to spend a lot of time talking to IDNs, to the biopharma companies, and to all of the other key players in the system. And there's a few things which are happening. Number one, which is really driving the uncertainty, is access. We've seen access change fundamentally in the last 18 months, and there's a question mark about what is it going to look like in the future. And there's a few things which are driving those access. If you pull the rug back a little bit more, one is the institutional restrictions. We already know that even before COVID, access to some of the institutions was particularly hard, and it's really evaporating, and we don't know when it's going to stop. I think one of the other key drivers are engagement preferences on an individual physician level. And this isn't just a question about millennials. We've really seen that the engagement preferences of all of the physicians has changed. And at Impiricus, we do a lot of surveys and we get that data back. There's been a big shift in terms of the preferences and how the physicians want to interact. And we see that they would all prefer to move to more on-demand. And then the other challenge when it comes to access is just physicians' time. There's less time, and I think they've also gotten used to this new model, this new normal for themselves, where they can work a little bit differently. And just to back up, I think, Andrea's point, we're also seeing a kind of repositioning of what the go-to-market model is. And we don't yet know what that end relationship for pharma and reps is going to be for doctors. Take, for example, face-to-face events and congresses. These are things that have completely changed. And when it comes to the measurement, the promotional sensitivity has completely changed. We used to assume that I think the reps were one of the key determinants of value. They absolutely still are, but we need to understand the promotional sensitivity of how they interact with the other channels and content to be able to deliver effective messaging and services and solutions for our pharma clients.
Well, it's fascinating. So both of you brought up a bit about measurement and data and what have you. So Andrea, I'm going to ask you, data and decisions. How do we get better at both? We're all dying to know.
Yeah, well, we don't lack data for sure. But, we hear a lot of conversation around actionable insight. And I think traditionally commercial teams have thought about that logic thread as being data informs analytics, and that informs our actionable insight. But I would suggest that there's another step to consider. And I think it's really important to integrate the team of people who contribute to those insights. That's an interconnected strategy and a lot of clarity around what your key business questions are so that we can all stay really pointed towards a common customer and business outcome. So we've really got to make sure that we're avoiding the sense of need or urgency to do a lot of activity, but instead focus our energy on sort of those prioritized actions that will really help us accelerate customer connections and depth of engagement. So as you can imagine, we're doing a lot of what I would call sort of a look back analysis. The last 24 months can tell us a lot about what is potentially going to happen going forward, and at least find those key nuggets of where engagement is occurring. Sandy was speaking to that in terms of the appetite of our customers, the HCPs at this point in time. And so we use that to sort of examine both historically where the engagement has occurred, and plus now we've lived through 18 months or more of this pandemic, and I don't think any of us feel like we're clearly out of that at this point. But there's definitely insights that we can glean from what we've seen and help us to make some informed decisions and really, as I mentioned, prioritize actions on a go forward so that we understand what is impacting engagement and how we can really get to customers more effectively. But also we all have to, at the end of the day, be mindful to the financial outcome of that and making sure we can connect all of that operational activity all the way to financial outcome for the benefit of our customers and of our colleagues and the investor community that, trust that we're all making sound decisions.
Those are great points. And one term that you use, kind of prioritizing engagement, really, really resonates with me. So Sandy, I'd love you to build on that a bit. Before we go into our crystal ball, how do we prioritize engagement? How is all of these things that we're doing and we're trying impacting the HCP experience right now?
So the HCP experience is changing quite a bit, Frank, and it's a mixture of positive and negative. And to give some specific examples, we see, for example, that a lot of the physicians that we interact with today are missing certain pieces of information. COVID and this change in the go-to-market model has affected virtually all of the channels. So they miss information today on what are the new products, what are the launches and the indications which are going to be coming and covered. We also see that pharma is creating fantastic resources, for example, for patient support. And as those resources are being promoted, physicians are just not aware about them because the channels and the way that they're receiving the information has changed. We also see that it's harder for them to actually even access some of the great resources that were there in the past. So accessing patient assistance programs, copay cards is actually going to have a negative detrimental impact on patients because many of the physicians just can't access them anymore, or they find friction in being able to get them. And then last but not least, which covers all of this, is traditionally we were building relationships, be that face-to-face or even at congresses or even sometimes with digital. And those relationships between physicians and pharma now need to be reconsidered in terms of how we build them.
Well, it's fascinating. Truly, we have to recognize that from an industry perspective, our customers' priorities, their preferred communication channels, not only have changed in what we hope is essentially a temporary situation, but when we do look to the future, what do they want to change back to? And what do they not want to change back to? And when it comes to our promotion, how can we meet the customer at that real nexus of value? So, Andrea, I'm going to bring it back to you here for a second. Let's start to move forward. We've got leaders of teams, of brands, of organizations that are watching us today. They're going into meetings today and the rest of the week, and they need to be effective. They need to face their team and their brands and their customers with some sort of thought, framework for thinking, tips, tactics when it comes to managing it in this uncertainty, making sense of the data, and to your points previously about just being effective with all the stakeholders who have expectations on us. So what advice do you give us as we go into these future meetings to manage this uncertainty and to be more effective?
Frank, I would suggest that one of the things that can be done that could have significant impact quickly is being really clear on what key action you want, which by that I mean the outcome. So when I'm engaging through a platform like Impiricus or the multitude of options that are available within the omni-channel sphere, whether that's reps, having essentially a video conference with their targets or the variety of sort of non-personal tactics. What is it that I ultimately want the outcome of that to be? And being able to clarify the key action and then be able to make sure you have all of the underlying KPIs in place so that you can be able to effectively measure the outcome of that. Now, at the C-suite, a lot of times there's obviously appetite for the financial measures of that. And there's always also the softer side or qualitative aspects of that. So it's really about finding that balance and measure of that so that we can understand, did the key action occur? What did it cost us to achieve that? What sort of other, insights do we need to take in consideration with the experience that our customer HCP had in those engagement opportunities? But I would say key actions is the one that we most often find becomes fuzzy. And when that's fuzzy, the entire measurement framework it's not going to stand up to the rigor that you'd ideally want.
Great advice. Yes, as an industry, we can be data rich, but knowledge poor. So trying to figure out how to make sense of the math and where we're really headed, I think that's sage advice. So Sandy, life science leaders are in the quagmire. How do we get out? What advice do you have for us?
So it's really simple, Frank. With uncertainty, we've got to increase our flexibility and agility. And I think that, almost to emphasize Andrea's point, you need that interconnected strategy focused on a kind of common business outcome. And, I translate that instead, and also in moving away from specific tactics to creating, say, platforms, which have that agility baked in. I think it's also key for our pharma partners today to think more about partnership. These are not problems that you need to solve by yourself. There are companies and there are solutions out there where you can partner to solve them. And then if we actually break down a little bit about like the channel and the content and the audience, from a channel point of view, we need more on-demand channels. That clearly is the way that we as a society and our physician partners are moving. They want to be able to interact with their ecosystem and with their pharma partners, but on their own terms at the right time with the right channel. So more on-demand channels. And then when it comes to content, the key word is democratization. Instead of us being able to feed up a didactic or linear content stream, we need to provide the partners with agility. And that's being able to say, here are the content pieces, and you can create your own journey. And then last but not least, when it comes to the audience and the data, we need to continually get richer data. But we also, to your point, Frank, need to ensure that we know what to do with it to actually create personalization. We certainly see in our world a lot of our pharma clients asking for more and more NPL level data, but we've yet to see them convert that into something which is actually going to drive a more personalized and agile experience for the physicians themselves.
Great advice from the both of you. I really do appreciate it. As pharma leaders, as medtech leaders, how are we doing the right things to alleviate the uncertainty that exists within our organizations and our brands. But very importantly, I think that you both brought it home to is there's stakeholders we're responsible to deliver value to. That can be revenue for our shareholders, but most importantly, the reason why we're all in this business is to create incredible value for patients. So patients are not left behind when they should be on our devices or our therapies that are in need. And if we're really going to stay true to that commitment, we've got to find clever ways to making sure that we're intervening with that value, making an impact so folks can go ahead and take action. And in fact, those patients are served. So I really do appreciate it. So Andrea, if we want to keep up with you, I know we're on LinkedIn Live today. We can probably find you. How do we connect with you and follow your thoughts moving forward?
You're absolutely correct. Our website is measurementmojo.com, or on LinkedIn, Andrea Westmeyer. And we're kicking off some new material, new blogs, new white papers. So there'll be a lot of things. Obviously, this is the time of year that everybody's looking for good ideas. So hopefully they'll find us and find that we have something compelling to offer.
That's fantastic. And how can you forget a company name like Measurement Mojo? That is amazing. Talk about retention. I love it. All right. And certainly to be remembered as well, Sandy in Impiricus, how do we keep in touch with you? How do we follow what you guys are up to?
Sure. So our website, Frank, is empiricus.com. We don't have such a resonation as Measurement Mojo in terms of our name. We're based on a Greek philosopher and physician, but empiricus.com is the best place to reach out to us. And on LinkedIn, obviously, we have our Impiricus LinkedIn page, and that's a great place to learn about all of the new developments and all of the new products that we're launching. We're actually up to 6 pharma products in the portfolio, and there are another 3 products which will be launched before the end of the year, which give our pharma clients just even more omni-channel capabilities.
Well, that is fantastic. So on behalf of our audience, Andrea, Sandy, thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And thanks. And so for everyone, hopefully you'll build in this conversation with us that much more next week. So September 9th and 10th, that's Thursday and Friday, we've got over 20 sessions, and we're talking about HCP engagement, the excellence in medical affairs, patient advocacy, trying to find a way to close the execution gap. That's the time when your brand potential or forecast is different than actual sales and performance. We got to figure out ways to solve that, because Q1 and Q2 for a lot of publicly traded biopharma and medtech companies was just a little bit off, to say the least. But also opportunities to interact with our panelists and our guests. So you'll see Sandy next week. You'll see so many of us, many peers. This is a peer-to-peer discussion. So medicinethemarket.com is the website. You can get your free pass. Please join us. And some of our highlight sessions will be here on LinkedIn Live. So on that note, make it an amazing Thursday. We'll see you all next week at Medicine the Market. I'm Frank Dolan. We'll see you soon.